the fact that we're here for 2 days talking about collaboration signals that as a media industry, we're more and more comfortable with working together and understand both the value that collaboration can bring and sometimes the necessity, honestly, in an age of dwindling resources for a lot of newsrooms. And I'm here to talk about how we can take that mindset a step further and pursue partnerships outside of our media silos that can help extend the reach, the creativity, and the impact of journalism. So why not using the term radical for these kinds of collaborations? Put up a couple definitions here that I chose that I think speak to why this word is so accurate for what I'm going to talk about. In the mathematical sense, the word radical it goes back to the root, right? And if we think about journalism as fundamentally about the collection, processing, and distribution of information, then it can look like a lot of things, right? The output can be a lot different. Normally, it's been the article or the story, but working with other people and working with partners outside of our newsrooms and outside of the industry can actually help us achieve something different, right? Where we can learn from other practices and other approaches and apply them to create and help reshape how we do news and how we approach journalism. And that's where we kind of get to these extreme changes, right? These shifts in how we do things. We've heard a lot about throughout the day about how the industry is changing, and we're having to experiment with it and reaching out to other people and other practices to apply those to what we do. So what do we get from a radical collaboration? There are 4 key points I'm going to walk through today and give you some examples about what I mean. First, when you work with someone just outside of your expertise, you can leverage a lot more ideas and creative approaches to and bring them into what you do. I'm actually surprised sometimes when I talk from everybody from designers to artists to public health professionals. And with journalists, we have a lot of overlapping goals. We all do relatively similar things. We just have different ways of talking about them. And I think that there's a lot that we can learn from each other in terms of what our practices are and how we can overlap and reach communities and stakeholders in new ways. We can also just bring journalism to new places, bring it outside of just our websites and our newspapers and our TV stations and our podcasts, into the community, into different places. And I'll give you some examples of those and what I mean by that. And fundamentally, we can reach and empower the people who are most directly affected by the stories that we're trying to tell. And get the public involved from the start in what we do in a really fundamental way. And we've heard some examples of that today that I think are really great. So I'm going to give you some examples of what this looks like. This is the mobile arts platform. It's operated by Chris Tajari, who's that man in the van, and his artistic partner, Peter Foucault, in Oakland, California, where I live. I met Chris in the end of 2014, I think, and we started a conversation. Chris is an artist in Oakland, and we started a conversation about how we could work together. What would that look like, right? He introduced me to his particular kind of art called social practice, which focus on art as the engagement with the community and interaction, that the interaction is as important as the product, which resonated with me being on the engagement side of the news, that exchange is something that I value, and so we wanted to work together. So Chris got invited to participate in an exhibit at the Oakland Museum in California, Oakland Museum of California, rather. And he was like, hey, is there a way that we could take this van, which he and Peter retrofit for different public engagements and turn into different art projects? He said, is there a way that we could work with CIR to do a project? So CIR had done a lot of reporting about surveillance technology used by local police. One of the key challenges with the reporting about surveillance is it's hard to really communicate the direct, from just me as a regular citizen, the direct impact on me. A lot of times it's like, I got nothing to hide, I got nothing to fear. And we wanted to kind of bring that conversation to people in Oakland and tell them about the kinds of technologies that the police have and largely the lack of policies that govern those technologies. So Chris and Peter turned their van into a mobile newsroom, and we literally drove around Oakland and did these pop-up events where we talked with people, had conversations about surveillance. We came up with a quiz where we literally threaded it with facts about surveillance technology from our reporting that are technologies used by police in Oakland. And we also created this screen-printed design by Aaron McKenzie, who's also a designer at the California College of the Arts, came up with this play on the Neighborhood Watch logo, where people could learn and then respond, right? So come up with what surveillance was to them. And I was really surprised at the range of responses that we got. This is just 3 of them. We collected more than 120 of these in the community. And this is something that, you know, I viewed as a success, and I think our organization did as well. And I would never have thought up a lot of this had I not started that conversation with these artists and really brainstormed over the course of a few months about how we could take our reporting about surveillance and translate it into something that people could really interact with in the community and see themselves in. So these collaborations can also bring the reporting to new spaces, right? Picking up with the Eyes in Oakland example, the main publishing platform that we had for all that material that we gathered was the museum itself. So Chris and Peter built this amazing interpretation of a surveillance center, and throughout the course of the exhibit, we were still driving around Oakland, and as we were collecting different responses, we put them on these monitors. So we were actually publishing new information there through the exhibit. That table over here was full of information with articles, facts, and things that we've gathered all about the technology, so you could actually learn in the exhibit. And that wall was where people could fill out their own response to surveillance and put it on the map where they live. So this is kind of a living way for us to publish the information. It was a new venue for the reporting and reached thousands of residents. We engaged about more than 700 people total, filled out the little slips. So that was a huge success for us and really got us in front of a lot of people that we otherwise wouldn't have engaged. Another good example of journalism in a new place was a couple years ago, the Public Insight Network teamed up with the American Library Association, and they were basically just asking a simple query about, you know, what are you doing at the library today? Which was a really cool and simple thing, and they had a map that really showed how what people are doing and actually engage new communities and new folks coming in that way. And that partnership in itself was something I think that was really cool and just tapped into a new audience and created a new venue. One thing, another big project that CIR has been doing that I love, has been very creative, is called Storyworks. We're bringing journalism to the stage and the theater. We've been doing this for about 2 years, and we basically pair playwrights with investigative reporters, and we have them create original plays based on the reporting, based on the journalism. And we've done about 7 or 8 of these, I think, now, and it's been really cool to see it evolve. Our latest production was a play called Justice in the Embers with KCPT. Where are my KCPT people at? Yes. So this was awesome, and I think this collaboration is actually born from the last RJI event with my colleague Megan Farnsworth, who talked about this a little bit before. So what they did was they paired a playwright with reporter Mike McGraw, who's a Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative reporter who'd been doing a lot of stories on a deadly explosion that killed 6 firefighters in Kansas City in 1988. And what they created, he teamed up with Jenna Welch, who's the artistic director of Storyworks here, and they created a play, got a huge community response. There was full capacity crowds, throughout the week that it was showing. We got a lot of even national media attention for it. And Mike himself wrote a piece for our website on revealnews.org where he was totally taken by the whole process, right? He'd been reporting on this for years and said, in his post that, that this play had actually galvanized the Republic and created a response that he hadn't seen before. That people were coming forward, that the sources were talking more, that the conversation was happening in a way that hadn't already occurred. the Storyworks normally goes in 2 acts. There's the first act, which is the play itself, and then the second act, which is a talkback, where we actually host a conversation with the audience between the playwright, the actors, and the journalists behind the story. And that in itself is a new venue to talk about the reporting and actually have a dialogue about it. A lot of times when you just read a story or listen to or watch a story, you got to go to the comments section. But with the play, you could actually have an opportunity to have a dialogue around the topic and actually ask questions. So the stakeholder side of this is really important because a lot of times we don't have, as news organizations, we don't have the audiences that are most directly affected by a lot of the stories that we're covering. So how do we go to them, right? We have to think and be creative about how we're actually trying to team up, leverage networks from our partners and reach folks in new ways. This is Rio Mesa High School in Oxnard, California. All of these fields around them are strawberry fields on all 4 sides. Those same strawberry fields use dangerous pesticides called fumigants. And we did a big investigation at CIR around the use of fumigants on strawberry fields 2 years ago. And I mean, these are our direct stakeholders, right? The kids that go to that high school and the teachers that work there, that's who we're trying to reach. That's who the story's about. So it turns out at that high school, they have a drama class. So Jenna, again, that's the artistic director of Storyworks. We reached out to the teacher who runs the program and said, hey, can we come to your class and lead a workshop with the students? She said, yes, and was very gracious and patient. And we basically went down there and worked with students for about 2 weeks. We gave them the story, taught them both tools of journalism and tools of playwriting and theater, and they created their own 1-minute plays based on the stories, which was awesome. And it was a new way to get those key stakeholders engaged beyond just like, hey, read this. It was, hey, read this and tell us how you respond to it. And it was awesome to see the different plays that they came up with, which was everything from basically mirrored a play that we did to being like, this is not really an issue. I think they're overblowing it. So it's interesting to get that kind of response and see the breadth of how the kids thought about it. One last example about journalism in new spaces. I really love this partnership that ProPublica did with Yelp. They had all this data about nursing homes and nursing centers. Really valuable data for people who are searching for a nursing home. But it lives on their website, right? So they teamed up with Yelp to put the data in Yelp where you're actually searching for it. People actually looking, if I'm trying to find a nursing home, I'm probably going to type it into Yelp, right? So the data was there and actually reached the people who were affected by it instead of knowing that you had to go to the website and search the database and look that up that way. And then the last component I'll talk about here is even teaming up with the public and treating the audience as partners and our communities as partners is in itself surprisingly a radical concept. And we've heard a lot of instances, I think even today, about how to really work with and team up with your audience, with your community. Harken is doing an amazing job of this. How many of you are familiar with Harken? So it came out of Curious City, WBEZ. It's actually a Matter project, going back to Corey's presentation. At its core, it's a very simple concept, but radical in that it starts with the public. The public asks a question, and then they're collected. The journalists collect the questions. The public then votes on the question that they most want answered. And then the reporters team up with the person who asked that question to find an answer for it. So it's journalism as public service and at its core, and really gets to a really important concept of just like really teaming up with the public to actually reshape what journalism looks like and treating journalists like a service like that. And shout out to Jennifer Brandell and Harken for this graph here, which is cool. Another really great example, WNYC has done a lot of cool projects involving science and sensor technology. One of the most recent ones they did was the Clock Your Sleep project that asked people to help them collect data about sleep habits. So it really literally started with asking the public to inform them through an app and basically track different methods of sleep. And basically they created a data project out of the data that they collected, and they had a wealth of stories and graphed the data in new, cool ways that inform a lot of different story ideas out of that. So they started with the public, partnered with them, and used technology to help create something new. So wrapping up, there are a couple key things to consider out of all this for if you're trying to do a radical collaboration and what to keep in mind. You got to think about back to who you're trying to reach at the first. This goes back to the stakeholders, right? If you're trying to think about who you want to partner with, who are the people that are most affected, right? This is key. From the outset, an exercise that I lead with in our newsroom is identifying the stakeholders of any story, right? That goes from the direct stakeholders, so those are the people at Rio Mesa High School, to the general public. If I don't live next to a strawberry field, why should I care about this story, right? And think about how you want to partner to reach those different levels of stakeholders and get to those different audiences. Funding models, obviously you got to pay for this stuff, right? So it's, you have to think about how you're going to do that. A lot of the Storyworks, for example, we got a grant. We've gotten grants to do the theater collaborations for Eyes on Oakland. Chris and Peter got a stipend through the Oakland Museum to participate in the exhibit. So there's a couple different ways that you can think about approaching the funding. And you also want to think about the compensation for the partner, right? A lot of times, as journalists, we ask a lot, and we don't really give a lot. So even from the partner side, you got to think about what you're getting, what they're getting out of it when people are giving you so much, right? You also need to think about the timelines, right? This stuff doesn't happen overnight, and it really takes a lot of time to come up with collaborations like this. Storyworks is a project that we've been building for two or more years and really have been developing this concept over time. Eyes on Oakland took 6 months or more for us to really conceptualize it from start to finish, and the exhibit itself was 3 months long. So these things take a little time, and I think you should allow that time to let these ideas grow. And you have to come up with expectations and goals from the start, right? I was just talking with Kirsten at lunch around how crucial this is. If you're doing something completely different, if you're partnering with someone in a different way that's completely experimental, you have to kind of know why you're doing it and what your goals are. What does success even look like? Because that's how you prove that it worked. You know, if you get to the end and be like, well, that was cool. I think it worked. I liked it, but you don't have anything to show for it. Or you didn't meet any goals that you set for yourself, then it's hard to kind of argue for it to do more when you want to go back and do something else. The mutual benefits. This kind of gets back to the compensation. A little bit of overlap there, but thinking about how you're getting something and your partner is getting something, and what that exchange is, basically. And then you got to think about the differences in approach. And this gets back to even picking the right partners, which is really, really key in collaborations like this. The reason that Eyes on Oakland worked well, it could have been a disaster, but it worked well because the artists that I worked with fundamentally got what I was trying to do. They got journalism. They knew that I wasn't out there. I'm not we're not advocates as journalists, so I'm not in the streets trying to tell people that, like, here's what you should think about surveillance technology. It's Big Brother's watching you. No, we were just giving people information, empowering them with that information, and letting them respond to it in a way that made sense to them. So that worked really well because we'd communicated those ideas up front. We talked through that. I made it very clear about where I couldn't go and what we could do, and they made it very clear about what they were trying to accomplish creatively. And that in itself made it work really well. So we got that out of the way. We understood each other. We understood the approaches and how they overlapped. That's it. That's radical collaboration in a nutshell.
Questions? Got time for a question? Will you tell us just a little bit more about what you did with KCPT, just to elaborate just real quickly?
Yeah, definitely. I'll get to you, Dave. So KCPT, so Jenna Welch, who is our creative director of Storyworks, she teamed up with both Mike McGraw and Michelle Johnson was a playwright. They commissioned a playwright in Kansas City, and they all worked together to both take Mike's reporting on this on the topic of the story of the explosion that killed these firefighters, and they just developed this narrative that literally was born and followed the reporting. It was about there were six people that were in jail because of the explosion, and 5 people in jail because of the explosion, and there's a reason to believe that some were wrongly accused. So that was kind of the heart of the reporting. It was very timely, and it was there was a Supreme Court ruling that actually affected the case, and one of the men that was in jail. So they worked together this whole creative process to actually perform it. They did a multi-night run in Kansas City, and got a lot of great response to it. I don't know if anyone wants to talk about from your end what it was like. I mean, we got a lot out of it.
Yeah, so we sold out every single performance during the run, and as you mentioned, as Cole mentioned, the reporting changed. I mean, the story changed with the reporting because the investigative reporting was still going on with the trial, and so midway through the run, they were actually rewriting the play to actually feature what was going on with the reporting. But I think Mike McGraw, if he were here, would say it was one of the most impactful moments of his journalistic career, and this is a guy who's been investigative journalist for 40 years, as he said, a Pulitzer Prize, and was very hesitant actually going into the collaboration, wondering how a theater would represent his work. So I think that was probably the most beneficial. But I think as far as a collaboration with a public media company and then NCIR, what we got from that was just a different way of presenting journalism to the public, which was pretty engaging. And that part 2, that act 2 that you were talking about, that was as engaging as the actual play itself. Listening to people talk about the journalism and what they gained from just attending and then learning more. Because Mike was on all those panels afterwards, all the talkbacks. And
that part's really important because I think this is what I was talking with Kirsten about at lunch, is we often say, I want to start a conversation. I want my story to start the conversation, right? We don't even talk about what that really looks like. And in this case of StoryWorks, we were having the conversation right there, and it was something that people could see, you could report on, and you could moderate in a productive way. That's not just a bunch of people talking at each other on the internet, but it was people in real life connecting and being convened.
they're passionate.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, I mean, another example, it was maybe 3 years ago, and Joaquin Alvarado was telling me, so we're going to take this story about a dilapidated housing project in Richmond, and we're going to take this spoken poetry jam club in Oakland, and we're going to perform it. And I have no idea what you're talking about. I had no visual at all. And then I think a year later, I went to the performance, and it was the most astonishing manifestation of investigative journalism I could have ever imagined. And then we sat in the audience in this tiny little theater, sat through an hour of discussing with the actors what was it like. And it turned out that one of them knew that housing project because he used to go there all the time because his grandmother lived there. Mm-hmm. And so that to hear them talk about the effect that this investigative report had on them, and then to see it manifest in their voice, but with rigorous journalistic, attention to detail, I'm still just amazed by it, absolutely amazed by it.
A little more detail on that. Didn't include that in this presentation, but if you want to check it out, he's talking about, we did a collaboration with Youth Speaks. They're a youth literary nonprofit in the Bay Area. And we created a thing called the Off-Page Project, which literally, same concept as StoryWorks, but we paired our investigative journalism with youth poets. We did this investigation into this public housing complex that was totally dilapidated, run down, and we teamed up with this poetry group of 3 young guys in Richmond who they not only created an original poem that we performed, recorded a video. It's called This Is Home. You can watch it online. But they're so talented, they created a play and actually did a StoryWorks play based on, it was something original that they came up with based on the story. They interviewed the same sources that our reporter interviewed. They actually went along with her during her reporting trips to the hacienda, the housing complex. And it was a really cool experience. We've done several of these videos through the Off-Page Project, where and you can see them online. We've done videos and a couple other instances. So yeah, and the impact of that too. I want to point out actually just last month, Hacienda, the housing complex that we wrote about, they shut it down and moved all the residents out. So it was empty. So that literally talk about the timeline, but that took about 2 years for that to actually happen. So the impact did occur just on a larger scale.
Excellent. Cole, thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Cole Goins.